The clinking of champagne flutes sounded like shattering glass in Layla's ears. Each polite laugh, each murmur of cocktail party chatter felt like a personal insult. She stood near a marble pillar in the grand ballroom of the Shilla Hotel, a ghost in a borrowed silk dress, trying to project an aura of belonging she hadn't felt in months. This gala was for the Seoul Museum of Art, where she'd managed to secure a junior curator position after the divorce, a small, defiant foothold in a city that had tried to erase her. But being here meant seeing them. And there they were. Her ex-husband, Daniel Cho, looking smug and infuriatingly handsome in a custom tuxedo. On his arm was Ashley, the American intern he'd left her for, all blonde hair, blue eyes, and the kind of vacant smile that suggested she'd never had a complicated thought in her life. The divorce had been swift and brutal. Daniel's family, with their old money and impenetrable social walls, had made sure of it. They had stripped her of everything that bore the Cho name, leaving her with a modest settlement and the lingering taste of humiliation. Layla focused on her champagne, hoping to remain invisible. But Daniel had always loved an audience. He steered Ashley directly toward her, his smile a predatory slash. "Layla, I'm surprised to see you here. I didn't think the museum paid you enough to afford a ticket." His voice was just loud enough for the surrounding guests to turn. Layla felt a familiar, hot prickle of shame behind her eyes. She lifted her chin. "It's a work event, Daniel. Some of us still have careers." Ashley giggled, a tinkling, unpleasant sound. "Oh, that's so cute. You're still playing with art." Daniel's gaze swept over Layla's simple black dress, a stark contrast to Ashley's glittering, designer confection. "It's a shame, really," he said, his tone dripping with false pity. "You had the world at your feet. Now look at you. All alone. What was the point of it all? You have nothing to show for our years together. You're just decorative. And I found a much prettier decoration." The cruelty was so blatant, so deliberate, it stole the air from her lungs. The words landed like stones, each one a reminder of how easily she had been discarded. The whispers around them grew louder. She was a spectacle, the jilted wife, the forgotten woman. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Her throat was tight with unshed tears of rage. That's when she felt a shift in the atmosphere. A sudden, palpable silence fell over their small circle. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. A shadow fell over Daniel. Layla made the mistake of looking up. A man stood just behind her shoulder. He wasn't large, but he possessed a density that seemed to warp the space around him. He was dressed in a Tom Ford suit so dark it seemed to absorb the light, tailored with surgical precision. His face was all sharp angles and unforgiving planes, his black hair swept back from a high forehead. But it was his eyes that held the room captive. They were dark, utterly still, and fixed on Daniel with an unnerving lack of emotion. He moved like the room owed him space. Layla had never seen him before, yet she felt a jolt of recognition, as if she were seeing a predator in its natural habitat for the first time. The air crackled with a silent, lethal energy. Daniel's smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then dawning fear. He seemed to shrink under the man's gaze. The man ignored Daniel completely. His attention settled on Layla. His eyes weren't warm, but they were focused, intense, as if he were the only other person in the universe. He extended a hand, not to shake hers, but palm up, an invitation. Hesitantly, she placed her hand in his. His fingers were cool and firm as they closed around hers. The contact sent a strange, grounding shock through her system. He brought her hand to his lips, his gaze never leaving hers. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small, velvet box. He opened it. Nestled inside was a ring, a sapphire the color of a midnight sky, flanked by a constellation of impossibly bright diamonds. It wasn't just a ring. It was a statement. A claim. Before Layla could process what was happening, he slid the ring onto her left hand. It was a perfect fit. The weight of it was immediate, undeniable. He finally turned his cold, diamond-hard gaze back to Daniel. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but it carried across the sudden hush of the ballroom with absolute authority. "You will apologize," he said, the words clipped and precise. "You do not speak to my future wife that way." The world tilted on its axis. Daniel's face went white, his jaw slack with disbelief. Ashley stared, her blue eyes wide and empty. The whispers around them erupted into a roar of shocked speculation. "My future wife." The words echoed in the cavernous space of Layla's mind. The man beside her, this stranger, had just drawn a line in the sand, and he had placed her firmly on his side of it. He didn't release her hand. His thumb stroked the back of her knuckles, a small, possessive gesture that felt less like comfort and more like a brand. Daniel stammered, his arrogance dissolving into a puddle of fear. I don't understand. Who are you?" The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. It was a cold, sharp thing. "My name is Kwon Ji-young," he said, as if the name itself were a weapon. And perhaps it was, because a wave of recognition and terror washed over Daniel's face. The name Kwon Ji-young was not one spoken in polite society. It was whispered in back rooms and boardrooms, a name synonymous with the city's shadowed underbelly, with power that operated beyond the law. Ji-young didn't wait for the apology. He deemed Daniel unworthy of further attention. With his hand still holding Layla's, he turned and began to lead her away from the scene. The crowd parted for them, a sea of stunned faces and avid eyes. No one dared to get in their way. His grip was a steel band around her fingers, not painful, but inescapable. She was being swept along in the wake of his power, too shocked to do anything but follow. His hand moved from her hand to the small of her back, a guiding pressure that propelled her through the opulent lobby and out into the cool night air. A sleek, black Maybach purred at the curb, a uniformed driver holding the rear door open. Ji-young ushered her inside, the door closing with a heavy, final thud that sealed them off from the world they had just left behind. The inside of the car was a cocoon of silent, black leather. It smelled of wealth, but also of him, a clean, sharp scent of bergamot and something darker, like smoke or scorched cedar. The city lights of Seoul streamed past the tinted windows, blurring into ribbons of neon. Layla could feel the heavy weight of the sapphire on her finger, a cold, alien presence. She finally found her voice, though it came out as a ragged whisper. "What was that? Who are you?" He turned his head to look at her. In the dim light of the car, his face was a study in shadows and angles. His expression was unreadable, a mask of cool indifference. "I told you. My name is Kwon Ji-young." "And the rest of it?" She pressed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "The ring? Future wife." "That," he said, his voice a low, smooth murmur that vibrated through the enclosed space, was a strategic acquisition. Daniel Cho and his father have become a problem for my organization. Publicly humiliating the son by claiming the woman he's so publicly discarded, it's a message. A very clear 1 inch. Layla stared at him, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. She wasn't a woman he had rescued. She was a weapon he had just deployed. A pawn in a game she didn't understand, played between men who dealt in power and violence. "So, I'm a message. You are now the most valuable piece on the board," he corrected her, his gaze dropping to the ring on her finger. "And you are under my protection. Which means you are also under my control." The finality in his tone left no room for argument. The car sped through the night, carrying her away from the life she knew and deeper into his. The Maybach delivered them to the private underground entrance of a skyscraper that pierced the clouds over the Han River. The penthouse was an exercise in brutalist minimalism. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking, godlike view of Seoul, a glittering carpet of lights spread out below. The furniture was sparse, expensive, and unforgiving, all black leather, chrome, and dark wood. It was less a home and more a fortress, a cold, elegant command center. Kwon Ji-young moved through the space with the easy ownership of a king in his castle. He shed his suit jacket, draping it over the back of a severe-looking chair. Underneath, he wore a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with lean muscle and the faint, dark edges of intricate tattoos disappearing beneath the cuffs. He walked to a wet bar carved from a single slab of black marble and poured 2 glasses of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. He handed one to her. Her fingers were trembling so badly she nearly dropped it. "Drink," he commanded softly. "You need it." She took a sip, the burn of the alcohol a welcome distraction. "You still haven't explained what you want from me." "It's simple," he said, taking a seat in an armchair opposite her. He didn't lounge. He occupied the space with a predator's stillness. "You will play the part of my beloved fiancé. We will be seen at the right events, photographed by the right people. You will live here. You will want for nothing. Your life, to the outside world, will be one of enviable luxury." "And in exchange?" Layla asked, her voice tight. "In exchange, the Cho family will be systematically dismantled. Every insult Daniel ever leveled at you will be repaid 1,000 times over. His father's empire will crumble. And you," he paused, his eyes locking onto hers, "will be the beautiful, smiling reason for it all. The symbol of their defeat." The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. He was offering her revenge on a silver platter, but the price was her life. Her freedom. She would be a bird in a gilded cage, a beautiful prop in his war. She thought of Daniel's sneering face, the casual cruelty in his voice. She thought of the years she had spent trying to fit into his world, contorting herself into a shape that pleased his family, only to be thrown away like trash. The anger, cold and hard, began to solidify in her chest, overriding the fear. "Why me?" she asked. "You could have chosen anyone." "Because you are not just anyone," he answered, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "You are his. Taking you is not just an insult, it's a violation of his pride. And because when he cornered you tonight, you did not cry. You did not plead. You stood your ground. There is steel in you. I can use that." He was right. She wasn't a fragile doll. She was a survivor. She had survived the Cho family. She had survived the divorce. She could survive this. The choice was stark: return to her quiet, lonely life, forever looking over her shoulder, or step into the fire with this dangerous, compelling man. It wasn't really a choice at all. "For how long?" 6 months, he stated. "By then, there will be nothing left of the Chos to concern us. After that, you are free. I will give you a new identity, a new life anywhere in the world you choose. You will be compensated handsomely." She looked down at the sapphire on her finger. It felt less like a shackle now, and more like a weapon. Her weapon. She met his gaze, her own resolve hardening. "All right," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I'll do it." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was not a warm expression, but it held a measure of respect. "Good. Your new life begins now." The first week was a disorienting blur. Layla's modest wardrobe was replaced by a closet filled with designer clothes, shoes, and handbags, all chosen by a silent, efficient stylist. A new phone appeared on her nightstand, its contacts preloaded with a single number: his. Her old life was packed away into boxes and put into storage, a neat and tidy erasure of the woman she used to be. She continued her work at the museum. Jeong had insisted on it. Normalcy is the most convincing camouflage, he'd said. But nothing about her life was normal anymore. She was never alone. A quiet, stern man named Mr. Park became her shadow, his official title, head of security, his actual role that of a warden. He drove her to and from the museum, stood guard outside her office, and watched her with impassive, knowing eyes. Jeong himself was an enigma, a creature of discipline and silence. He rose before dawn, spent hours in a home gym that looked like a military training facility, and then disappeared into his soundproof office. Men with hard faces and watchful eyes would come and go, speaking in low, urgent tones. Layla learned to read the rhythm of his empire through the tension in the air. She saw the cracks in his armor only in stolen moments. Late one night, unable to sleep, she wandered into his library. It was a vast, 2-story room lined with books on art, history, and military strategy. On his massive mahogany desk, amidst neat stacks of files, was a single, silver-framed photograph, always turned away from the door. Curiosity overriding caution, she picked it up. The picture was of a young woman who shared his sharp cheekbones and intense, dark eyes. She wasn't smiling, but her expression was fierce, proud, and full of life. It was a stark contrast to the cold, controlled man Layla knew. The next day, she took a risk and asked Mr. Park about the woman in the photograph. The security chief's face, usually a blank mask, tightened almost imperceptibly. That was his older sister, Minjun, he said, his voice flat. She passed away some years ago. He offered no more details, but the sudden chill in his tone told her the subject was closed. This was his wound. The one vulnerability he kept hidden. A woman he had failed to protect. The realization added a new, dangerous layer to her understanding of him. He was not just a monster. He was a man haunted by one. Their interactions were brief, formal. He would inquire about her day at the museum, his questions precise and detached. They ate dinner together most nights, the silence between them thick and heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts. She found herself watching him, studying the way he held his chopsticks, the cold calculation in his eyes as he read a report, the almost invisible tensing of his jaw when he was displeased. One evening, he found her in the library again, poring over a book of classical Korean ink wash paintings. She expected him to be annoyed at her presence in his private sanctuary. Instead, he walked over and stood behind her, his presence a wall of heat at her back. She froze, every nerve in her body suddenly on high alert. "Look here," he murmured, his voice a low vibration, so close to her ear it made her shiver. He leaned in, pointing to a detail on the page. His chest brushed against her shoulder, and the scent of him, bergamot, smoke, and clean linen, enveloped her. The artist used a dry brush technique to create the texture of the rock, a sign of impatience, or perhaps defiance. She could feel his breath ghosting against her neck. The proximity was dizzying, a potent cocktail of fear and a strange, unwelcome flicker of attraction. In that moment, he was not the cold-hearted mafia boss, but a man who understood art, who saw the world in shades of defiance. The silence stretched, charged and electric. It was the first time she had felt anything from him other than cool command, the first time he had seen her as anything more than a piece on his chessboard. The retaliation from the Cho family began not with a bang, but with a whisper campaign. Daniel, smarting from his public emasculation, used his connections to spread vicious rumors about Layla, painting her as a gold-digging opportunist who had trapped a powerful man. Ji-young dismantled these efforts with chilling efficiency. A few quiet phone calls, a few closed-door meetings, and suddenly the journalists and gossip columnists who had been so eager to print Daniel's stories fell silent. Businesses associated with the Cho family began losing contracts. Their stock prices dipped. It was a slow, methodical strangulation, and Ji-young orchestrated it all from the quiet of his penthouse office. But the Chos were not a family to be underestimated. They had ruled their corner of Seoul's elite for generations, and the patriarch, the elder Mr. Cho, was a far more dangerous animal than his son. The game escalated. One crisp autumn afternoon, Mr. Park was driving Layla back from the museum. They were stopped in traffic in the bustling heart of Gangnam when a large, black truck suddenly swerved out of the adjacent lane, its engine roaring. Layla only had a moment to register Mr. Park's curse before the truck slammed into the side of their sedan with the force of a battering ram. The world exploded into a symphony of screeching metal and shattering glass. The impact threw her against the door, her head striking the window. For a second, everything went white. Then Mr. Park was there, unbuckling her seatbelt with one hand while drawing a handgun with the other. "Down," he yelled, shoving her head below the seat as the sound of gunfire erupted around them. The next few minutes were a chaotic blur of noise and terror. The sharp crack of pistols, the deeper boom of a shotgun, the shouts of men. Mr. Park's body was a solid shield over hers. She could feel the recoil of his weapon as he returned fire through the shattered rear window. Through it all, a strange calm descended upon her. This was real. The danger she had only imagined was now a physical, screaming thing. Then, as quickly as it began, it was over. The gunfire stopped, replaced by the sound of sirens in the distance. Mr. Park cautiously raised his head. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice tight with adrenaline. But Layla didn't listen. She pushed herself up, her body aching, her ears ringing. The scene outside was one of controlled carnage. The black truck was stalled, its front end crumpled. Two of Jeong's men from a follow car stood over two figures lying motionless on the pavement. And then she saw him. Kwon Jeong. He must have been nearby. His own Maybach was parked haphazardly a few feet away, the driver's door still open. He strode toward her wrecked car, his face a mask of glacial fury unlike anything she had ever witnessed. He moved through the chaos, as if he were the calm eye of the storm. He wrenched her door open and reached for her, his hands surprisingly gentle as they checked her for injuries. His gaze was frantic, searching her face, her arms, her body. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice a low, vicious growl. "No," she managed to say, her voice trembling. "I'm fine." He pulled her out of the car and into his arms, holding her against his chest in a grip that was less of a comforting embrace and more of a desperate, possessive claim. He held her for only a moment, but it was long enough for her to feel the frantic, heavy beat of his heart against her cheek. This wasn't the calculated move of a strategist. This was raw, untamed fear. Fear for her. The realization hit her with the force of the car crash itself. This was no longer just a game. The message they had sent had been answered in blood, and she was standing at the epicenter of the war.